Google searches over the last month. That blue line, that's Project 2025. That red line, that's Taylor Swift. And the yellow line is the NFL. You can see searches for Project 2025 at the top.
Convicted felon Donald Trump and his campaign are reportedly panicking because despite their dishonest, desperate attempts to publicly distance themselves from Project 2025, a literal MAGA supervillain plot to radically reshape the government if they win the upcoming election, there are more Americans Googling Project 2025 than the NFL and Taylor Swift. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video, which in and of itself is a continuation of a video that we did previously debunking the lies that Donald Trump, the Trump campaign, the Trump administration have nothing to do with Project 2025, despite the numerous inextricably incestuous connections between Trump, the Trump campaign, and the Trump administration. We've debunked that already, and yet, for the longest time, Project 2025 was relatively obscure. I mean, we've known about it for months. But thanks to increased media scrutiny, as well as a call out by Taraji P. Henson during the BET Awards, right now, there are more Americans Googling Project 2025 than two major American institutions, perhaps the biggest American institutions that we have. So I'm going to play this clip and we'll unpack it together.
The right-wing Project 2025 calling for the end of an independent Department of Justice, instead placing it under Trump's total control, allowing him to launch the kind of investigations he and allies like you are calling for. Trump knows how toxic this all sounds to most voters, so he's recently tried to distance himself from it. Today, though, ABC News reporting on the extensive links between Trump, his campaign, and Project 2025. Google searches over the last month. That blue line, that's Project 2025. That red line, that's Taylor Swift. And the yellow line is the NFL. You can see searches for Project 2025 at the top, that blue line, now surpassing searches for Taylor Swift and the NFL.
That is potentially devastating for the Republicans, for Donald Trump, for the Trump campaign. And reportedly, he and his aides are really frustrated about the attention on Project 2025. So it says that Trump aides frustrated by media attention on Project 2025. New York Times reporter says Trump's aides have long worried about the candidate being connected to the Hard Right Heritage Foundation plan. Trump's aides have long worried about his being tied to Project 2025, says Maggie Haberman of the New York Times, explaining why the Republican felt the need to distance himself from what is widely viewed as a far-right blueprint for his second term. Penned by Conservative Heritage Foundation and boosted by Trump aides such as Stephen Miller, Project 2025 outlines a hard right plan to purge the federal government of career civil servants, among a slew of other controversial provisions. Okay, the New York Times reporter explained that Trump can try to distance himself from the initiative, but his campaign's close ties to the authors will make any attempt difficult to believe. Trump can say, quote, he has nothing to do with this, end quote, Haberman said. But then everyone's going to fact check that statement and has just made it into a bigger deal. So this is exactly what Trump's advisors had been concerned about for some time. Is the statement going to make it go away? It doesn't really seem like it. And again, this was, we talked about this in the previous video, but again, it's not just one or two connections. It's multiple prominent connections. As a matter of fact, you know, it's not even just with the Trump administration before, even though multiple former Trump administration officials are intimately involved with Project 2025. The Trump campaign, the campaign's literal spokesperson, Carolyn Leavitt, has starred in advertisements and recruiting efforts for Project 2025. Again, the links are many and they are strong. And I want to play just a few clips. I mean, we could play dozens, but I'm just going to play just a few recent clips in which these connections have been accentuated.
No, not at all. I mean, we know that Trump isn't really an ideologue. He surrounds himself with people who want to push an ultra-conservative agenda. And so look at the people who are working on his campaign. Look at the people who are running Heritage. It's a lot of the same donors. It's a lot of the same comm staff. And he's really building out his plan. You know, Charlie Kirk is running the Get Out the Vote effort for the RNC. Charlie Kirk is someone who came out today and said, Project 2025 is the blueprint.
The blueprint. It's the blueprint. And again, some people are desperate to try to defend Trump in this respect. Again, they say, he isn't the one putting pen to paper on this. Well, nobody expected him to. As we've talked about, as the gentleman there just mentioned, Trump is not an ideologue. He's a conservative populist. Okay. And by the way, he has a long-standing history with the Democratic Party. He was a Democrat for most of his life. Then he became a Republican. Then he became third party. And then he eventually went back to being a Republican again. He chose the Republican Party simply and only because it is the only major party which is a pliant tool for him. It is the most pliable, most effective tool for his narcissistic aggrandizement. That's actually an indictment of the Republican Party more than anything else, that they are so sheepish and cultish that they would be so easily co-opted by this idiot, this ideologically unprincipled and inconsistent buffoon. Ronald Reagan would be spinning in his grave right now if he understood what the Republican Party has become. And Ronald Reagan was awful in so many respects, but he had an ideology. So this idea that, Trump's not putting pen to paper, that's irrelevant. Multiple thick connections between Trump, the Trump campaign, and the Trump administration with Project 2025. Again, another clip.
The idea that Trump doesn't know what the Heritage Foundation is and that its people are responsible for mapping out policies for his administration is laughable, especially when several of his former White House officials like Ben Carson, Ken Cuccinelli, Peter Navarro, Ross Vaught are all involved with the organization. The director of Project 2025, Paul Dans, also worked for Trump as a senior aide. Even top Trump allies like Caroline Leavitt, his national press secretary, and Stephen Miller, his former senior advisor, both appeared in a September 2023 Heritage video promoting Project 2025.
Yeah, so again, profoundly dishonest of anyone to suggest otherwise. I do want to go back and again reaffirm, as the Democrats' House Judiciary account pointed out, that Project 2025 Google searches, which is based on Google Trends, is a pretty reliable tool to gauge public interest. It's skyrocketing. And that may not be the case. It may plummet tomorrow, but right now this is good, and we should do everything in our power to encourage it. Again, as Parker Butler pointed out, it's higher than NFL and Taylor Swift, arguably the two most important and two most popular non-government institutions in the United States. I mean, these are seen as American traditions, Taylor Swift and the NFL. The idea that even briefly Project 2025 would supersede that is extraordinary. Brian Krasentine even points out that Project 2025 is getting more attention than the Hawk Tuah girl, the TikTok trend. So yeah, folks, this is staggering. The other way it's manifested itself in a way that's potentially disastrous for Trump is the RNC is going to have its convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You may recall from a couple of weeks ago, Trump reportedly, according to multiple sources, trash talked Milwaukee. Again, the site of the RNC convention in and of itself, a swing state, Wisconsin, right, that Trump needs to desperately win. So the Milwaukee, Wisconsin Journal Sentinel, which if I remember correctly is the most circulated newspaper and publication in Wisconsin, they've made it a headline deal. Project 2025 author to be the sponsor of the RNC. So this is all over Wisconsin now. Some will say, well, listen, again, despite the connections, Project 2025, it's not officially on the Trump website. The Trump website is about Agenda 47. Well, a reporter has actually gone through and broken down the multiple connections between Agenda 47, Trump's official plan, and Project 2025, which is the more sinister iteration, which again is being worked on by many members of Trump's campaign, Trump's administration, and a potential Trump administration in the future. And what you find is there is like the Venn diagram between Agenda 47 and Project 2025. It's damn near a complete circle. So even ignoring the abundant evidence and appealing to just what's on Trump's website, it's virtually a one-for-one match between Agenda 47 and Project 2025. So again, there's no reason to give Trump the benefit of the doubt when there's so much evidence to the contrary. Navigator Research has done some recent polling on this. Opposition to Project 2025 grows as people learn more about the plan. After reading 19 proposed policies for Project 2025, opposition grows from 49% to 63%, while support for the plan declines from 31% to 24%. Okay, that's Trump. If Trump has one talent, it is understanding He doesn't always adhere to it. He doesn't always follow it, but it certainly has his finger to the pulse of the Republican Party. He understands some of these things. He's not, completely without instincts. He has to understand, or at least those close to him, based on that article I read from Salon that talks about how frustrated and panicked his aides are. There are people in Trump's orbit who understand that Trump's association with this far-right supervillain plot could be politically toxic because, as is often the case, these conservative provisions are wildly unpopular. 9 times out of 10, a conservative notion is not popular, which is why they appeal to so many minoritarian institutions, like the Supreme Court, like the Senate, so like appealing to the filibuster, ways to impose their unpopular agenda on the rest of us, right? So it is detrimental to their cause, the idea that people would learn more about it. MAGA, non-MAGA Republicans show important cleavages on views of Trump, their party, and its positioning Project 2025. Okay, again, it breaks it down on a case-by-case basis. It points out, though, that the vast majority of Americans have heard little to no information about Project 2025, which is why this trend that more people are paying attention to it, or starting to pay more attention to it than the NFL or Taylor Swift, is so damn important. And it's so damn important that that trend continues. But folks, that's where we are. That's why the Trump camp is panicking at the moment. And we have an obligation, I believe, to exacerbate that panic as passionately and as long as we can possibly do it. It needs to be a sustained panic. We need to be shouting from the rooftops that if Trump wins the White House, if Republicans keep the House, and if Republicans take the Senate, which is increasingly likely, it's not certain, but increasingly likely, particularly if our anti-Trump Democratic coalition stays fractured and disengaged and demoralized, that the provisions of this policy or this whole policy agenda are much more likely to come to fruition. And that would be disastrous for the vast majority of Americans. Let me know what you think in the comments.